Good morning. I hope everyone's had a fruitful morning, enjoyed some of the workshops, had a good breakfast. I'm Bridget Moix, General Secretary of FCNL. Very glad to be back here with you and excited to introduce our guest speaker, Representative Jim McGovern. Jim McGovern has been in Congress serving the 2nd District of Massachusetts since 1997. When I saw that, I know, it dates both of us. When I saw it, I realized that was also the first year I was an intern in FCNL's young adult program, the first year I came to Washington as well. But he has stayed every year in Congress working tirelessly for issues that we care deeply about. He is a leader on international human rights, on food assistance, and the needs of those in our communities here in our own country and around the world, and on peace. And he's one of the few members of Congress that on the front of his website, in his bio, he says, "I am committed to peace." So thank you, Representative McGovern. He also knows that all these issues are interconnected, that what happens here in our own communities, whether that's gun violence or hunger in our own communities, is deeply connected to what happens around the world, to war and poverty around the world, and how US policy is connected to all of that. He serves since 2018 as the lead Democrat on the powerful and important House Rules Committee, very important role in that sense. And he's a leader among his colleagues, and he cares deeply about ending gun violence, and was just telling me a little bit about speaking truth to power to some of his colleagues on that issue. He is a true public servant who understands that serving in Congress means serving the people in the communities you represent, and that the communities understand those problems best and are best placed to help lead the solutions. So I want to turn the time over to Representative McGovern to share some words of wisdom and encouragement with all of us. And he has also asked to have time to engage. So get your questions ready. This is a great crowd. You're going to get some good, probably some hard questions as well. Before I do that, I want to introduce him to all of you in a little bit. So we have people, mostly young people from around the country, from 30 states, as well as the District of Columbia and Guam, here represented. Let's see, how many folks in this group were born 1997 or after? So this is the next generation of leaders for change. Excited to hear from you, and then to go to Congress today and tomorrow to do 140 lobby visits to help end gun violence by investing in violence interrupters in our communities. So very powerful group. We're thrilled that you're here with us, and we would love to hear some words of wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you. Well, thank you, Bridget, for the very generous introduction, and I can hardly wait to hear what I'm going to say after that build-up. Let me begin by telling you that I love FCNL. And for many, many, many years, way before I even got elected to Congress or got into politics. I appreciate the dedication to peace, to justice, to nonviolence, to respecting every single individual in our community. And so I want to commend all of you for being here under the heading of this incredible organization. And let me just begin by saying, when I remember I was a history major, and I used to have this professor who used to end every class by saying the same thing. He'd say, remember, the world will not get better on its own. Class dismissed. And when I was taking this class, I have to be honest with you, I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. I just thought he was some kind of eccentric. But now that I'm in Congress, as I've gotten older, I see the wisdom in those words. Nothing, and I mean nothing, of any consequence or of any benefit to anybody ever happens on its own. It's only when good people, like-minded people, come together and demand change. And so I appreciate you all being here together today. going up to the Hill and, knocking some sense into the heads of some of my colleagues in a nonviolent and in a loving way, because that's how you change things. That's how you change things. Because I'll tell you, the people who have different values than those of you in this room, people who are members of the gun lobby, for example, they're knocking on the doors of members of Congress every single day. They're writing out big checks to the campaigns of members of Congress every single day. So they're doing their part. The only way we're going to defeat them, the only way we're going to push us in a different direction is when people like you come up and you make a different case. And I'm a believer that people have to be engaged, that politics is important. I worked my way through college. I went to American University here, working in the office of Senator George McGovern of South Dakota. No relation. I thought he had a good last name, but he ran for president in 1972. I was an anti-war candidate, and when I was in middle school, I campaigned for him. And I was from Massachusetts. I was proud that he won Massachusetts convincingly. I was a little depressed he lost 49 other states, but hey, I was only working in Massachusetts. But the bottom line is that this was somebody who every day got up and fought for the things that I think all of you here, and certainly that I care about. And he used to remind me all the time, and that you don't have to be successful every single day in your advocacy, but you got to be faithful, and you got to be determined, and you can't get weary, because some things change quickly, and sometimes it takes a little bit longer. I had the honor of serving with Congressman John Lewis, a great civil rights leader, and a great member of Congress and a dear, dear friend. And I was with him the last visit he made to the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, just a couple of months before he passed away. And I remember him saying, and he was dying at the time, and him saying, look, we've made great progress, but it didn't happen overnight. It took years. It took years. Some things went faster, some things took longer. But we can't give up. And I appreciate the fact that you were here under the kind of heading of trying to promote violence interrupters at a time when our country is engulfed with way too much violence. We were talking beforehand about guns. I mean, we have so many massacres in this country, they don't even make headlines anymore. I mean, my kids now are 21 and 24 years old. I still worry when my son calls me and says, I'm going to a concert, or my daughter says, I'm going to the movies, or I'm going to a party, or I'm going to a nightclub. I worry about them when they go, I worry about her, she's in school, when she goes to school. Because gun violence has impacted every aspect of our life. And, we're the only kind of developed nation in the world, the only industrialized nation in the world that has this level of violence. And I love it when people say, oh, guns don't kill people, people kill people. Bridget was telling me about, one of the speakers who said, yeah, people with guns kill people. But we have to start asking ourselves, what is it about this country, that makes gun violence so prevalent? I mean, you have other countries that have video games that are sometimes too violent. You have other countries that show the same movies that we all see that sometimes can glorify violence. I mean, they have access to social media just like we have access to social media, yet they don't have the level of gun violence that we do. And what's the difference? The difference is they have stricter laws when it comes to owning a gun. Our laws, to the extent that we have them, are filled with all kinds of holes, that allow people to not only own guns, but to own guns that are weapons of war. And so we are tolerating this right now. And I would argue that one of the reasons why we are tolerating it right now is because the special interests, the gun lobby in particular, has a stranglehold over members of Congress. They have bought members of Congress. And there are too many people in this country who I think have just kind of given up, who's like, oh, we're just never going to be able to do anything about this. Now, to be sure, there are a dedicated group of people who are out there fighting, with all their energy and all their might, a lot of young people in particular. But we need to expand this movement, and we need to keep the pressure on Congress constantly. We see violence within our police force all over the country. And people talk about police reform. How do we do police reform? Well, you know what? Police reform may mean that some of the responsibilities the police now assume, really they shouldn't assume. They should go to somebody else. So, and maybe it's a person who is an expert in mental health issues. Maybe it's somebody who can deal with conflict resolution or know how to talk people down from difficult situations. We ought to pursue those avenues, because too often, we see instances where violence results when maybe there might have been a different way. So I know you're going to be on the Hill today. We have been pushing legislation like the Safer Communities Act, which invests more in mental health services and crisis intervention. It closes the boyfriend loophole. It enhances background checks for people under 21, cracks down on gun trafficking. I mean, these are important steps. It's not everything. We have to continue to fight to increase social services so that more people can get the support that they need, while also pushing for more expansive background checks when it comes to guns. We need gun storage regulation, and we need a ban on assault weapons. I have no idea why, we need to have these weapons of war so available to people. Someone said, because I want to hunt. Well, the only thing you hunt with an assault weapon is another person. I mean, some of these weapons, have this rapid fire capacity. Look, at my eyesight is lousy. I mean, I can't see across the room, even with my glasses, but I could probably kill something if I had an assault weapon that had this incredible rapid fire capacity. It's not about that. It is about, these weapons are used to hunt people, to kill people. And we should not tolerate that under any circumstances. I know you're going to be advocating for more investments in the appropriations bill, to advocate for local violence interruption funding in this year's appropriations bill. There's a letter going around by Representative Robin Kelly, dealing with community-based gun violence intervention issues. It doesn't mention violence interrupters by name, but I mean, you ought to be advocating that we put money in to some of these violence intervention programs that we know go directly to violence interrupters, because otherwise it could go to police, it can go to other things. We want to emphasize the importance of violence interrupters. There are, we have to do a lot of things. We have to focus on the root causes of gun violence in this country, and we need strong gun control policies in this country. But I'll just close with this, and then we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. I cannot stress enough the importance of youth involvement in our democracy. The truth is, the future of this country is in your hands. You are 100% of our future. You are what keeps us strong. You are what keeps people like me going. You are what gives me hope at a time when sometimes last week we were talking about book banning in Congress. So, I was about to pull out the last two threads of hair in my head out of my head, because I couldn't believe that in the year 2023 we're talking about banning books in school. But I hope you're excited about being here today. I hope you're excited about your advocacy, and it doesn't need to stop here. And I hope that some of you might consider a future in public service. Look, if I could run for Congress and win, anybody can run for Congress and win. I was the longest of the long shots, and lightning struck. The bottom line is, we need good people to run for office, because enough bad people run for office. And we need good people who, even if you don't want to run for office, to continue to be involved, to pay attention, to care, to rise up and say, I agree when somebody's doing something right and to rise up and say, I disagree when they're wrong. You know, as I began my remarks by saying, quoting my history professor about the world will not get better on its own, you know what? The world will get better if all of you leave here and continue to remain engaged. And I'm really, really I'm so happy to see all of you, even though I can barely see you with the lights in my face, but you look incredible. So thank you for having me, and let's have some questions. All right.
You can see a little easier then.
All right.
Great, thank you so much. That is so encouraging to hear. Thank you for your leadership on all this. I'm going to ask one question, and then I'm going to open it up to lots of other questions. You talked about the root causes, structural causes, and one of the things that struck me today, reading the New York Times has a expose on how guns have changed our lives. And it says that guns are now the #1 killer in our country of children and teens, but actually have been the #1 killer of black children and teens for 2 decades. Can you talk about that interplay of racism, structural issues, that really shape gun violence, and how do we talk about those with Congress and with members of Congress who may not be open to hearing those kind of arguments? How do we enter those conversations?
So here's a bit of advice on how you talk to members of Congress, especially about complicated issues. And I'm going to tell you something that may shock everybody here, but intelligence is not always a prerequisite for serving in Congress, okay? So sometimes you have to approach things a little bit differently. And I'm a big believer in telling stories because I think, facts and figures and numbers and statistics and graphs, all those things are incredibly important, right? And we need to be able to back up what we say with facts. But I worry sometimes that we've lost our human ability to feel what they mean. So many people are dying. I mean, the numbers are astronomical. You know, we can identify with, the story of one person being killed, but when it's thousands of people, what does it even look like? How do people absorb that, right? So I think part of your advocacy needs to be storytelling, and you need to talk about, the realities that different communities are faced with, and you need to talk about the systemic issues, the systemic racism that are still part of our system here. And I know some members of Congress get really defensive. Let's put it, any system, anybody in party, everyone gets defensive. And I tell people that I'm not, when I talk about systemic racism, I'm not saying that you personally are the racist. I'm talking about the system that you are part of over years has formed in a way that has biases that are built in, that are racist. And we see that in policing, and we see that even in our discussion about violence. You hear this on the House floor. We talk about gun violence, they tend to only say, well, the real violence is in Chicago. The real violence is in, minority populated neighborhoods in New York, right? I mean, that's the way they try to. So there is violence there, but there's violence everywhere in this country. The kids at Sandy Hook who were mowed down were mostly white. The kids in Florida at that school were mostly white. So we're at the point now where we have to acknowledge the systemic biases and the racism, but this is a problem that affects everybody. And if we can't use this moment to bring everybody together, so we're not saying, oh, it's only this community, that community, then we're missing an opportunity. But I think stories, and speaking from the heart and being genuine, I think are more effective than, let me throw you, here's the statistics, here, take this, whatever. You want to make sure you have those statistics, but it's telling stories.
Great, and that is exactly what folks are being trained to do, to tap into their own story. And also, you'll be glad to know there was a workshop just before you arrived on running for office and getting young people elected. So we only have about 7 or 8 minutes. So what I'd like to do, if it's okay, is take a few questions. And the first question is going to go to the Massachusetts folks. Is there someone from Massachusetts that wants to ask a question? Great. Please stand, and if you could identify yourself and where you're from.
Hi, I'm Glenn Cody from Acton, Massachusetts. I'm co-chair of the Massachusetts Peace Action Legislative Political Committee, and so thank you for the work you're doing on the TPNW bill. My question is, how do we bridge the gap among lawmakers that seem to get more airtime on talk shows when the tougher they talk? Like, how do we get them to basically just take a breath and go, wait a minute, maybe throwing more money at police budgets in the military, whether it's foreign policy or violence here at home, how do we get them to take a more nuanced approach?
Great, great. So that's one question. I saw a couple other hands. Let's take a round of three, so we can maximize time. Here. So, oh, sorry, go ahead. You're the mic runner. Great, thank you.
Good morning, Representative. I am Garrett Simmons. I'm here with Wilmington College from Ohio. OH.
IO.
There we go. So I was just wondering, do you think it is important for us to present this ask as not anti-gun, especially to our red offices?
Great question. All right, and let's take one more from this side. Yes. Right straight here on the second row. Yeah, the second aisle.
Brittany Cuevas, and I'm here from Iowa. I'm actually originally from Texas, and so my question kind of regards to the current circumstances in Iowa. So surprisingly, when I moved to Iowa, I learned that a lot of people my age have a lot of assault rifles. Like, it's pretty common. You would think in Texas, but no. And you also talked about expanding the movement. So what would be a suggestion for going back to places like Iowa where they have this perspective of, well, I don't do it and that doesn't happen here, so why should my guns be taken away if, it's not really a me issue, and shift it to, well, we can't make any exceptions and we should just, it should just not be available to anyone. All
right, there's a few questions.
Yeah, all right, so on the first question, these are all good questions, by the way, and on the first question about, people, members of Congress, politicians in general, the tougher they talk, the more airtime they get, and how do we discourage people to be rational and to be reasonable and not just to be grasping for the latest soundbite, as I understand the question. Part of it is people get rewarded for bad behavior. I don't know why, but they do. And you see right now with some of the members of these Freedom Caucus, some of these people that are just way out there, the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world, the Lauren Boebert, the more outrageous, the more incendiary they are, the more airtime they get, the more Twitter followers they get. And by the way, they raise a lot of money online for their bigoted and racist and quite frankly, dangerous rhetoric. I think part of the way we need to combat that is that we need to, if I say something that is, over the line, I think that you should call my office or call me and say, I'm a constituent, I don't appreciate that. And if you're out of their office, I would still try to weigh in and let them know that they're not universally loved. I would also say this. When I first got elected, for a long, long time, when I would walk in, I go to Dunkin' Donuts for my coffee every morning, because down the street. And if you go into Dunkin' Donuts between 7 and 8:30 in the morning, there's always 10 older guys solving the world's problems and overdosed on caffeine and Fox News. And so sometimes people would say things that were outrageous, and I would say, I'm not going to dignify that with a response. Oh, that's too way out there. I don't do that anymore. We now engage. And my wife says, well, learn to use the drive-through. But when I don't, I try to now more. But I said the reason why I engage is because I don't want this to spread. Right? And if I'm in there and they're saying something that's off the wall, and I don't say anything, there are people also having coffee there who are listening and saying, "Oh, they must be right because he's not saying anything." The people who work there as well. So I think we have to be engaged, and we have to confront these people on the issue of should we be not anti-gun when we're talking about violence interrupters? Know your audience, right? There are some people who you will talk to who have supported gun control. You can say whatever you want, and they're like-minded. For the people who have a history of voting for guns, I think you might want to be careful in how you approach them. George McGovern used to say to me, you don't have to agree on everything to agree on something. And the something you agree on, let's get that done. So yeah, there may be people you talk to who you have a very different opinion with on, whether people should have, whether there should be an assault weapons ban or not. You can have that discussion at another time with them, unless you think you can convince them. But if you can't, I mean, if you want their support on this, on violence interrupters, so focus on that. So whether, no matter what, no matter how you vote on some of these gun stuff, that's not an excuse not to vote, not to support appropriations to help with violence interrupters. And then on the final question on how do we expand the base, we just got to talk to people. Right? I mean, none of this is easy. Advocacy is not easy. If it was easy, then we wouldn't have to worry about anything, right? It takes time and it takes patience. And I think when we're trying to convince people who have a different opinion than we do, I think we have to be very careful that we don't begin the conversation in a way where they think we're insulting them, where they think we don't respect their opinion. I think we have to just say, we have differences of opinions here, but let's see whether we have some commonality here. Let's see, let me tell you some of the stories. And again, you can bring people along. It takes sometimes, it's not quick, but that's how that's how we build movements, right? And people who may have disagreed with us yesterday may be our allies tomorrow, but we have to help them with their journey so they don't feel like you're saying, oh, you're uninformed, or you don't know what you're talking about. And when people say that to me, they're just kind of, I go, ah, right? I mean, a better way to say is, hey, look, we have differences of opinion. Let me tell you what I think, and let's begin this dialogue.
Great, thank you so much. I know there are lots more questions, and I know you have a very busy schedule, and I think we need to wrap up now if I'm getting the signals correctly. Oh, excellent.
Okay.
A couple more minutes. All right, let's take another round of questions. All right, I'm going to come back over here in this.
Yeah, they can go second. I have someone over here.
Okay.
Oh, okay, great. It's so hard to see.
Hello, sir. It's just an honor to have you speak here. My name is Caleb Hodgins. I'm from California. And I just wanted to ask you, based on what you know about some of your colleagues who may not respond the best to logic and reasoning, what would be the best way to approach them with some of our stories or arguments on this matter?
Great, thank you. Let's go. I'm trying to get different parts of the room. So I'm going to go here to the third row. Yep, right. Oh, do we have the mic? Sorry, Justin, I'm making you run.
Justin's getting his steps
There's a
in.
couple hands there. So, yep, right there in the colored sweater.
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Cameron. I'm from Dallas, Texas, and I'm a human rights major at my school. So first of all, I wanted to say I graduate this May. Do you need an intern by chance? Just by chance?
Do you need an intern?
But just wondering, just in case. But my actual question is, I'm in student senate at my university, and I go to a PWI, and it has been extremely, extremely difficult to get things passed for my constituents. I'm the African American senator. It's been really hard to get things passed, and I have found it to be really disappointing, and I feel like it's really hard to get anything passed. So I'm curious, how do you stay motivated when you're surrounded by people that are hard set on not changing their stances and making progress for people? I have experienced so much difficulty, and I've been frustrated to the point where I want to quit just at my school. So I can't imagine how it feels to be in Congress and feel that way. So I'm curious as to how you stay motivated and how you don't feel completely defeated by the people and the mentalities that are around you.
Great. All right, let's take those two, because those are great questions.
So the first question about, how do you deal with people who don't seem to respond to logic and reasoning? And it's hard, right? I mean, it is hard because it's disappointing. But the reality is that there are some people who run for office and who get elected who are not interested in legislating or making the world a better place. Some of those people are people who are more interested in Twitter followers and maybe a sound bite on Tucker Carlson, or they're just interested in notoriety. And and that we have a lot of those people. And they're not only in Congress, they're in state legislatures, and they're in city councils, and they're in school boards. And I think, really, you make a good, honest attempt to try to reason with them, but if they're not, you know what? Then you have to defeat them. And we want to elect good people, but sometimes you got to beat bad people. And even if you're the person that that is most troublesome is halfway around the country, you can find ways to help. You can go out and volunteer. You can help raise money. You can help do phone banking, from wherever you may live. But at the end of the day, we have to make it so that people are not rewarded for bad behavior. We need rational, reasonable people. Doesn't matter whether you're Democrat or Republican or liberal or conservative. The deal is, political ideology doesn't mean that you cannot be rational, and nobody, no matter who you are, if you're in elected office, has the right to dismiss people and to not listen. So I'm a big believer in, I want to make nice, but I'm not a cheap date. And if you're not willing to work with me, well, then, you know what? Then you leave me no choice but to work to make sure you don't come back. On the second question, yeah, we do have an internship program in our office. So you just can go on our webpage, and we're happy to, we take interns from all around the country. And the question was, what motivates me when things are difficult? Well, things are pretty difficult right now. As I said last week, we dealt with a bill that makes it easier for school districts to ban books. I actually in the Rules Committee, I actually read a book about Rosa Parks into the record. It was a book for second graders that at a school district in Florida, they decided to not continue to offer to the second grade class. And I find that really distressing. Today we're doing a bill that makes it easier for polluters to pollute. It is a giveaway to the big oil companies. And look, we're doing that because because my side didn't get enough votes in the last election. And so we have a very reactionary right-wing group that's calling the shots in the House. And so I've gone from, I want to pass major expansive pieces of legislation to we have to do damage control. And so what motivates me is, look, if I'm not there, then they win. If I'm there, I can maybe frustrate some of their efforts that will, do things to this country that I don't like. And again, and when I'm sad and I'm depressed, I think of my friend John Lewis again, who never, ever, ever gave up. And I got to tell you, this is a guy who's been arrested, I don't know how many times, almost beaten to death, continued to fight for voting rights, continued to fight to move things forward. And just, again, a couple of months before he died, is leading a group of us down to Selma, Alabama, to make sure that we appreciate the history of the civil rights movement, and that we understand that the battle is not over. There's more to be done. And so, there are people who have been doing this for a long time who have made a real difference. Again, I was a history major in college. Look at our own history. The things that we treasure most, people fought and fought and fought and fought for that. I'll just conclude with this. The people on the other side, they want you to get weary. They want you to get tired. They want you to say, hey, this system sucks. I don't want to, I'm done. I'm walking away. That's what they want. Because as soon as you walk away, they get whatever they want, right? And I'm just telling you, you can't. And I say that not just for you, but you're going to have kids someday. You're going to have grandkids. It's for your generation, and it's for future generations. We almost lost our democracy on January 6th. I'm going to tell you how I was the last person on the House floor on January 6th. Speaker Pelosi, we were overseeing the Electoral College certification, and Speaker Pelosi was called away, and she asked me, will you take over? So I went up and I took over. She thought she was coming back. She left her phone there. And then I presided over the session as all hell began to break loose, and we had to evacuate everybody out of the chamber. And so when I walked out from the floor into the speaker's lobby, which any of you have been there, there's 2 sets of doors that are kind of glass from the midway up. When I walked out from here to where the front row was the door, there were Capitol Police with their guns pulled, there were chairs that's against the door, but I could see there was this mob outside of, right outside of the door, using their fists to try to smash the glass. People swearing at me, people with Confederate flags. We haven't had a Confederate flag in the Congress even during the Civil War, right? People with shirts on that had anti-Semitic slogans, you know, and we barely, you know, that's when that woman was shot, but we barely got out. And I said to myself after that, you know what? These guys can't win. You know what? I mean, there are some things worth fighting for, right? Democracy is worth fighting for. It's messy, it's complicated, whatever, it's worth fighting for. So don't ever give up, and understand the importance of the work that you are doing here today. This is important. This is a movement, right? I mean, it doesn't, you know, this, all of you coming up talking about violence interrupters, it's going to make an impression, right? And then you have to do the follow-up. So in any event, look, you know, I'll leave you with this. You give me hope, and you know, and you should also be hopeful by the numbers of people that are here, and you just you know, don't give up. I mean, and remember this day that you're here in Washington, because I think I think we will prevail. We will get common sense gun safety legislation at some point. We will continue to dismantle the systemic racism that exists in so many of our systems here. We will move forward to get closer to ending hunger in this country and expanding healthcare. I mean, I really believe we will go there. And you will be all around when all that happens. But you need to remember this day, because you were part of the movement that pushed us in that direction. And so, look, I want to be wind at your back. If you're up on the hill and, you know, you've had enough, you know, you come by our office and you can hang out, and I have a balcony. You can look at the Capitol and think big thoughts, and then get back up and start knocking some heads together. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was excellent.
Hello. Okay, thank you so much again to Representative McGovern. If we could have the Massachusetts people here just follow Justin, who is waving his arms in the back. Thank you, and thanks, Glenn, for asking that question. Thank you all for asking questions. So let me give some announcements, because usually when I get up on stage, it means there are announcements. We are shifting everything in the schedule from here on out by 15 minutes. So we're gonna break for lunch in a second. This slide shows where all of the birds of a feather locations are. We sent an email last night. I realized after looking at the email that 3, I think, were left off. So please take a close look at these, because the ones that were left off of the email are reflected up here. So If you have any questions, let us know. You can break for lunch, and remember that the workshops are now starting at 1:15. So the next set of workshops is 1:15. That means that the set of workshops after that is 2:30. So really just as soon as you get back from lunch, shift everything by 15 minutes. Please do your best to get through that line quickly, to eat your food, to get into your workshop places by 1:15 p.m. Yeah, I see people rushing to get in line. 1:15, please, next set of workshops. Thank you.